they did was radicalize me, and so now they need to be afraid.
A few moments later.
The short answer is she didn't. She's losing by 26 points in St. Louis City. So now we've seen it across the dividing line, and we have called this race. NBC News has declared that Wesley Bell, freshman Democrat from Missouri's 1st Congressional District, has won renomination. He has defeated former Congresswoman Cori Bush.
Folks, are we back? Is the tide finally beginning to turn against DSA communist candidates? Well, make no mistake about it. Democrats still have a long ways to go in ever resembling something like a normal political party in America. But tonight, we do have some good news, because tonight was yet another Super Tuesday night, many different primary elections across America. And to make a long story short, we just witnessed the best overall outcome for Republicans, because the political weakness of these far leftists is beginning to show. And that's something we theorize, which is that when you take this ideology to swing states, when you're no longer running in places like New York City or Seattle, sure, these ideas might be trendy in Brooklyn. But once you go to a state like, let's say, Michigan, where you have a contested battleground race, that's not going to fly. And as one example, that's what we just witnessed in this Michigan Democrat primary, where on one hand, radical jihadi communist Abdul El Sayed did secure, he won the nomination. They just called the race. We've been staying up all night to see what would happen there, as we predicted. But after projections, he was going to win by double digits. This thing ended up being extremely close, which means what? The DSA candidate massively underperformed, highlighting what? Massive political weaknesses for this guy. He's not that popular, but because he, in the end, secured the nomination and the late rally by the Democrat establishment was unsuccessful in blocking him from being the candidate, that's also why I say it's the best possible outcome for Republicans, because we're running against a candidate who we thought was weak. Now we've just confirmed to be weak. We'll explain why. We'll talk about what that all means. But the story doesn't just stop there. Because over in Missouri's 1st Congressional District, anyone remember a crazy woman by the name of Cori Bush? Formerly Congresswoman Cori Bush? Well, tonight, following a endorsement from the National Democratic Socialists of America, she, of course, tried to make her big political comeback, thinking that, oh, I got voted out in 2024 because it was a anti-far leftist environment. But hey, look at Mamdani, look at all these characters. Maybe I'll be included. So she tried to make a grand political comeback tonight. And guess what happened, ladies and gentlemen? It was a complete flop. She lost by almost 50 points. This is all hilarious. We're so back. I mean, let's not get complacent, because obviously, you know, the midterms are where the Republicans, it's our job to actually stop the communists, because you can clearly see en masse the Democrats are failing to do so themselves. But interesting how that works, right? Our theory is proven. This ideology doesn't work in swing states. And if the trends continue to Wisconsin and other types of primaries, these candidates are set for a clobbering in November. That seems to be clear. Again, let's not get cocky about it, but let's talk about it, guys, in today's video, results from tonight's elections. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, if you recall anything about Cori Bush, she is basically the proto-Jasmine Crockett, absolutely obnoxious, ghetto, ratchet, screaming woman all the time. But if you remember, again, when she lost her primary back in August of 2024, she did this huge vow, right? This is what makes it even funnier, that she would be back. These Democrat establishment racists, they don't even know what they done yet. And, well, tonight, of course, was the comeback that she vowed. Take a listen.
Pulling me away from my position as Congresswoman. All you did was take some of the strings off. Let's be clear. 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 Let's talk about what it really is. Because see, now I don't have to worry about some strings that I have attached, and as much as I love my job, But all they did was radicalize me, and so now they need to be afraid.
Let's be clear. They need to be afraid of me, is what Cori Bush famously declared to the world when she lost 2 years ago, vowing some form of retribution. And tonight that materialized as, of course, she once again ran for her old congressional seat. And all that happened on the big Cori Bush revenge tour is that she ended up losing by, as I said, close to 50 points. Wah, 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 wah. And the reasons for that, I think, are rather obvious. Perhaps even voters in her own district just understood. She's a screaming, loud, do-nothing grandstander, okay? The proto-Jasmine Crockett, as we will call her. Anyone remember her, by the way, right? Very obsessed with TikTok and performances for MSNBC rather than actually being a functional representative who does things for their constituents, But that's not what's even significant. What I do find significant, given the current political trend, is that, ladies and gentlemen, Cori Bush goes down as the first candidate endorsed by the National DSA, the National Democratic Socialists of America, to lose an election in all of 2026. It is true that many local DSA candidates have lost, although we still know the pattern. Generally, these people are winning. So if we're to interpret this as some type of tide change, right? Maybe people are pushing back or whatever, even Democrat voters, that electorate is not very happy with these people, then certainly, again, not a sign that this trend is going anywhere, but that it's getting a little bit finally of pushback amongst the voter base, which overall just indicates it's too late, right? First of all, it's too late to stop it. These people, most of the primaries have already happened, right, in this country. But it does indicate that, hey, if this growing resentment against them is suddenly now materializing as the general election in November gets closer, that's obviously very good news for us. And there you have it. The story of Cori Bush indeed ends once again tonight. Although maybe she'll come back in 2028. I don't know. Maybe then she'll finally scream her way to getting her old job back. Pretty hilarious, too, how she made it sound like, I'm going to be totally unchained. They can't stop me now because I'm going to be out of Congress. And then she proceeded to do nothing. Where was the retribution, right? The retribution was her trying to run again and getting absolutely clobbered, right? It's pretty hilarious to witness. But ladies and gentlemen, now we shift to our main event, which was the highly discussed Michigan Senate primary between far-left, DSA-endorsed jihadi Marxist Abdul El Sayed and crazy woke white lady establishment pick Haley Stevens. And we've basically framed this race thus far as the battle within the Democrat Party, right? Who's going to win, third world or woke? Because Haley Stevens and herself, not exactly your most moderate or well-adjusted Democrat. Okay, she basically is famous for screaming in her COVID mask on the Senate floor, and she's kind of sounds like a totally insane person, but, not quite as far left as Abdul El Sayed, doesn't believe in abolishing the police and things like that. So, despite her weakness, despite the fact, by the way, she can't even really finish a sentence when she gives any speech, that's the establishment character. Then we have Abdul El Sayed. You can tell by his name. You can tell by his politics. Third world Palestine activist. Our speculation has been, and our little theory on this, and why I point out specifically she's a woke white lady, is when you think of what's happening to the Democrat Party, they always decry the great replacement while, of course, cheering and saying that very thing is happening, but it's actually happening within their own party, right? Your sort of 2010s white resist lib lady just gets taken out by a crazy Palestine third world jihadi who says that she's not enough of a jihadi, basically, right? Like, that's actually what's going on here. So thus far, and we've explained this race too before, by the way, so if you want, the full coverage on these candidates, feel free to watch our prior videos for context. But to make a long story short, that's the battle. It's a story we've seen repeatedly in many different Democrat primaries. The old woke guard and the new third world guard. And we basically have speculated that the third world's going to beat woke because that's what's happening to the left, right? That's why increasingly, for example, pride marches full of white people are being replaced with Palestine activism full of brown people, because that's like the Democrat Party when you think of it. That's what they've done. They've imported so many third worlders into their ranks that they're now the party of the third world. There's no room left in the Democrat Party for your old school white liberal like Haley Stevens. And by old school, we even just mean old school from 10 years ago, right? But nonetheless, okay, so that was the race going on here. Now, the betting markets, for example, the prediction markets, Projected Al Sayed would win by about 12 to 15%. That was the margin. Polls showed him beginning to run away with the momentum, right? First, he was leading by 4 points, 6 points, 8 points. It was clear where this was going. Seemed like a foregone conclusion just given by, as you probably know, the trends in the Democrat Party. I was actually wrong about this. I thought Al Sayed would crush Haley Stevens tonight. Again, Haley Stevens, not even a strong establishment candidate. She can't finish a sentence. But ladies and gentlemen, look what just happened. They did not call the race until almost 3 a.m. Eastern time, which is when we're recording this video, with 91% of the votes in. Abdul El Sayed barely leading Haley Stevens by just 25,000 votes. That is right. He's winning with 48.9% of the vote. Haley Stevens narrowly trailing after being a double-digit underdog effectively, a massive overperformance, a huge flop, a huge underperformance for communist Al Sayed. Haley Stevens sitting at 47.1. Here, by the way, is the margin throughout the night. So at 8 p.m., the New York Times, for example, given polling, giving the data, everything we thought was going to happen, Abdul El Sayed led by 9 points, so that was what people thought was going to happen. It's be close to a 10-point victory, right? 11:45 p.m. Abdul Sayed projected to win by 2.3. Then 1:15 a.m., 1.6. Now the current projection is that Al Sayed will barely take the race, ladies and gentlemen, by just 1.3. Extremely close. And again, folks, what does this show? Well, first of all, there is no denying still, Abdul El Sayed has won the Michigan Democrat primary. He indeed does represent the Democrats, and so they can't look at this race and suddenly say, oh, well, guys, we stopped the far left takeover, because objectively, as everyone thought would happen, the far left takeover did win. But what we just found out is that, again, folks, outside of Seattle, outside of New York, this is Michigan. This is the battleground state of 2026. This is famously a swing state, even a blue-leaning swing state somewhat, but still nonetheless a swing state. In the swing state, while that radical base of the Democrat Party still does exist, what we just discovered through this huge underperformance, almost 8-9 points from what we were expecting, is that, again, these DSA communists have massive political vulnerabilities. If you're the Republican tonight, if you're Mike Rogers sitting there watching this is the best possible outcome you could have wished for. Because not only are you running against their worst candidate, we just proved their worst candidate is actually extremely weak. This idea that they've taken over the whole Democrat Party nationally actually is not true, but they have clearly just a little bit that margin enough to be the candidates. But if, again, don't get complacent. You got to vote, obviously, and you got to be energized to vote against this person. But if we're forecasting ahead, what we can say is that this is a strong indication Abdul El Sayed is likely, or at least very vulnerable, to lose that seat, because he won, but he's very vulnerable to these communists. A massive reality check. In the more normal parts of this country, you are not nearly as popular as you think you are. And hopefully I explained that clearly enough, but that's why Republicans, very good results for us tonight. And by the way, this is the type of result you want to see as we get closer to general election season, right? Early on, the progressives are the only ones paying attention. They're like, yay, radical communists, let's vote for them. As we get closer, suddenly, these DSA candidates are starting to struggle. Yeah, it turns out even some people in the Democrat voter base, and especially independents, by the way, we've seen how socialism and communism poll among those groups. This stuff is not popular, right? So it's our job, obviously, in November to make these people go away, but certainly some good news. As if, by the way, the curse could not continue, it is worth noting that Hasan Piker himself, that's right, the guy who just put up a 9/11 photograph after previously in his streaming studio, after previously saying that America deserved 9/11 amongst many other things, praising Mao Zedong in China and the propaganda trips to Cuba and all this stuff. We all know about Hasan Piker. But guess who, by the way, is at the victory party tonight for Al Sayed? Cursing him all the way, right? Forcing him, by the way, partially to underperform is, of course, Hasan Piker, which I think tells you a lot about the current state of these communist Democrat nominees, right? It's basically a rite of passage. If you want to run to a general election as a communist, you need freaking Hasan Piker there of all people, right? In the same sense that Trump's endorsement, and I don't know who else in the Republican Party, I guess Sean Hannity's endorsement, people like that. In the same way that those endorsements carry weight in the Republican Party, you know, before in the Democrats, it used to be the Obama endorsement or the Clyburn endorsement. Now that's Hasan Piker, right? You want to run in a general election in this country, you need his approval. And then, by the way, if tonight's results are any indication, you can see what this obviously toxic person is going to do to your political campaign. But, you know, clearly a lot of these crazy DSA characters, as we've said before, they themselves live in a bubble. They live in an echo chamber. They think because they're surrounded by all these Reddit freaks that everyone in America thinks like that. So we're going to double down on being far left. And it's only the damn Democrat establishment and Chuck Schumer who's trying to tell us that these ideas are not popular. But I don't think that's how it actually works, right? I think we actually just saw the evidence of that.
By the way, we are told that Hasan Piker is there. Can you confirm that, Rich?
Yeah, I can confirm. He's probably about 10 feet behind me.
Yeah, well, good luck in November is about all I have to say to these people now. Keep bringing that freak around and see what happens on Election Day. Now, continuing on this topic of how actual Americans across the country really feel about these ideas and these people, I'm not sure. I'm not confirming there's any correlation here, but I do find it interesting that these surprising, shock, near upset, double-digit overperformance election results against the communists came amidst this announcement right here. And again, I'm just speculating. I'm just saying, right? This morning, DOJ announced, aka the Trump administration, announced that it would be monitoring polling sites in 4 Michigan cities for the state's primary election today. And you probably see a correlation here, including Detroit, Hamtramck, Lansing, and East Lansing, aka what? The federal government went to monitor and pay attention to the Democrat strongholds. And then suddenly, on that election night, I guess we just discovered the communists are not nearly as popular as people thought. Wouldn't that be the most fitting and sort of hilarious, if not so concerning, conclusion of all of this? Is that it was never real from the beginning, right? Oh, communism becoming popular across America. The rise of the far, it's just fake. It's literally like the far left is not rising, it's not happening. Not even saying that that's entirely what's to blame for this. I'm just pointing out kind of a funny correlation. But DOJ is saying that its Civil Rights Division will monitor for compliance with federal civil rights laws to ensure ballot security and transparency. And it's worth noting that the DOJ has monitored poll sites in years for both Republican and Democrat administrations, but that did not stop, for example, this morning, MS Now and liberal media losing their minds, saying that Trump was trying to steal the election. And then in the end, no, it was a Democrat primary. We don't really particularly care all that much, but yeah, still hilarious that this ended up being the outcome. And it's worth noting, too, that, you know, even in other places in Michigan, for example, you want to look at the House race, Michigan's 7th district. It's one of the most competitive swing districts in the country, currently held by Tom Barrett. So to make a long story short, you have here, in this case, the DSA-backed candidate ended up winning. So that's the overall outcome, is the DSA is underperforming, but they're still winning. So this guy is going to the general election, probably largely because the Democrats here failed to put up a strong opposition to that. But so, you know, what did we just learn in Michigan tonight? And what's the point I'm making there? We just learned the DSA is unpopular in Michigan, but they narrowly managed to pull off getting their candidates through. So you look at a key House race and maybe the most key Senate race of them all. The conclusion is things are looking rather good for us. But again, that's why you can't get complacent, because it's our job to actually stop these people. That's why it's also important. But still, regardless, very interesting results to say the least. You know, really makes you think a lot of things about the supposed popularity of this stuff that you've been told about in the past several weeks. But, you know, again, that's what happens when you go to the actual swing battleground areas of this country, right? The maybe more quote unquote normal parts. Yeah. Turns out, you know, despite all of our despair about the direction of this country, and, you know, it's still in many ways very valid. And, you know, I'm as worried as you. Let's also not forget, and sometimes there's a good reminder, right? There's still a bunch of normal people in this country. Okay. It is still largely a normal country. It's just, in many ways, there's a mob of freaks who are trying to pretend that they control it. But, and by the way, they did win tonight. But there's not as many of them as you think. Okay. And that's kind of the moment where, I don't know, the resistance of normal people basically says, oh, shoot, we exist. We actually outnumber them. Yeah, you do, but you got to go vote. That's what it's about, right? You got to go vote. So there you have it, though. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Until next time, God bless and peace.